Hello, my friends, beautiful souls. The subject of the day today is what is commonly referred to as ego death, and the concept of a part of ourselves dying. So I would say on our journey of spiritual awakening, we are inevitably going to experience many little ego deaths. I could define it or say it in a different way because sometimes ego death sounds a little bit scary or harsh, right? But essentially what it means is that how we have been identifying with ourselves so far is going to change or shift. And we're going to identify with ourselves differently. This may mean that our beliefs change, our opinions about things change, our perspective on life might change, or even existence itself might change. We may also change ways that we dress or talk or act. These all are shifts that can happen after or during an ego death. So let's define it a little bit further or give some examples and other ways that it can happen. And sometimes it can be like a really big happening, and sometimes it's the smaller experience. And this can often be an experience that happens during our initial awakening process, because all of a sudden things are different than we've known them to be. So therefore, we are different than we've known us to be. And at first, this can be just like our awakening, like this kind of a jarring part of it, right? We are no longer identifying with things around us the same, but we're no longer identifying with ourselves the same either. And this can be scary. And I think the word death maybe makes it kind of scarier, which is why I'm saying we can say it in other ways, but it is a very kind of succinct way of explaining it. And it can be scary, which is another reason why I think we use that word, is that it can be scary. And once you kind of go through enough of these experiences, it's not really, I'm not going to say it's never scary, but it's not really so scary anymore, right? But at first, it's very scary to not know any longer, or not be sure or clear any longer how you define yourself. Sort of start to kind of feel like you're becoming a little bit unhinged, because your foundation is shifting, and your foundation is your beliefs. Your foundation is how you feel. And therefore, after your beliefs and your feelings is how you act, how you be in the world, right? So this foundation is shifting, and some would say dying, right? The old self, the old self is dying and a new self is being born. This can be really activating for parts of ourselves that are very attached to knowing ourselves in a certain way. So there's something called orientation that happens, and this is a psychological term, but this is also a spiritual term, right? And what it basically means is that exactly sort of what it sounds like. We orient around certain things that help us to kind of define or understand who we are. So when we're young, we might orient around our mom or our dad, right? Our family, because that is how we know where to be. That is how we know how to get what we need, right? Food, water, shelter, mom and dad. We're oriented around them. As we grow, we might orient more toward our friends. That's where we get our needs met. So we tend to it shifts a little bit, right? Then we also orient to ourselves in different ways. We get to know, what it feels like to experience different experiences in life, and those become orienting to how we define ourselves. We know how we feel when we are in love. We know how we feel when we are having our favorite food. We know how we feel when we are visiting our favorite place. Those become orienting principles of defining who we are, how we settle into ourselves. Now, if some of these begin to change, how do we then orient? And this is why it ends up being called ego death, right? Is because of the disorientation that can happen when we go through a massive awakening or transition, and we have to kind of reorient, reorganize our self. One of the most absolutely helpful things for this and every aspect, I think, of the spiritual awakening journey is to develop a strong sense of your source connection. I will go more in depth about this, I think, in another video, but basically why I'm saying this and what this means is that if source is the energy of everything, right, at a point of consciousness when everything is aware that it is one, it's that point of oneness, of pure unity, and that becomes, you develop your strong connection with that, and that becomes your point of orientation, then you can never become completely disoriented. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense to everybody. If source becomes your point of orientation, then no matter what happens, what sort of disassembles in your reality, it breaks down, disappears, reappears, dies, is recreated, that source connection is always where you can come back to orient to. You always know yourself through source, through oneness, as a piece of source consciousness, unity, oneness. That never goes away, never changes. So just kind of take that concept in for a minute and maybe kind of explore what that might mean or feel like to you, because it's going to be different for everybody. And like I said, I think I will go into source connection and more deeply in another video, but this is the reason it can be absolutely so powerful in our journey, is because as things are sort of discreating, recreating, we're changing beliefs, we're changing feelings, we're changing perspectives, we're changing groups of people. That's a lot of change. So to have one orienting place to come back to that never changes, right? Source is always going to be source, can be really, really helpful. Really, really helpful. Now, there can also be, when you're first really gaining your relationship with source, there can also be a disorienting quality in the knowing that if you fully go into being a part of oneness, then your consciousness is then with a part of oneness, and that in and of itself is a type of ego death. Does that make sense? So I'm not trying to be confusing by giving two contrasting statements of what it is to work with source, but yeah, there's different levels of knowing that connection, right? And going into that connection, knowing it in your cells and your beings and in your heart that the truth that I am one with all is never going to change. That's what we want to lock in. That's what we want to orient around. Now, this idea that part of us has to die in order for us to evolve, what if we were to think of it instead as part of us is always going to be, we're always going to be shifting and changing. And beliefs, perspectives, feelings of the past, right? If we're looking at time linearly, which it's not really, but beliefs, feelings, perspectives of the past, what I've known, we'll say it that way, what I've known, are going to change and shift and going to become what I know, or how I'm being now, how I've been, how I'm being, what I've known, what I'm knowing. But it can be an integration. It's integrating. It's not one's dying, another one's being born. Because then we end up with this polarized experience, and it's either like this way is dying or this one's being born. And the truth is that we're growing into this. And the truth is that we're going to grow again into this. And we're going to grow again into this. Like, we're always going to be evolving, right? So getting used to the idea or the concept that we're always going to be shifting and changing, it doesn't mean that a part of us has to die. Because for some parts of us, if you were to tell them you have to die in order for me to move forward, they're not going to like that. They're not going to feel comfortable with that. And that may actually halt your progression. And I think a lot of people miss this. If you tell yourself you have to die in order to evolve, that may actually halt your progression. If instead you can let all parts of yourself know that you're evolving, you're integrating together and continuously moving forward, and what has been true doesn't have to be true, but we're also not ignoring that it was true, right? That's what integration means. That's what integration means. We're not going to pretend like something didn't happen, but we're going to allow it to change and be different now. And you who experienced that is going to actually come with me. Come, because you are me and we are evolving together, moving forward together. So my goal in so much of my work is to move us forward from the dualistic thinking, right? The right, wrong, good, bad, over here, over there. This has to die in order for that to give birth. This has to be light. This is dark. And really like incorporate the movement in between, the movement back and forth, so that we can have transitions and we can take everything as a whole and move it forward as one, right? Incorporate everything and move forward as one. So we're not dissociating, we're not bypassing anything. We're so empowered by the work that we're doing with our shadows, with our self-discovery, our courage and mindfulness and building self-awareness, that we're actually able to really integrate and move forward from what we've known. Grow, right? Grow. We don't like kill the seed in order for it to become a plant. It sprouts and then it becomes a plant. So we can, look at like our journey as, we're going through the sprouting period, we're becoming a plant, and then eventually, guess what, we'll be the seed again. But that's a whole other perspective. And that does become what we could call a cycle of birth and death, but it's not an end and a beginning. That's what I'm trying to get at here. It's like, it's not an end and a beginning. It's cyclical, because that plant, it doesn't just die. When it's done, it seeds. It plants a new plant that grows and then seeds again. So we're on a journey, always on a journey. It's not ending one, beginning another. It's continuous. just breathe, just like our breath. When we inhale and then we exhale, it's not the breath is never moving in between the two, right? It's in and out. They are actually connected in there. So connect the part of you that has been with the part of you that is being and going to continue to be, because that is how we move forward. And the ego death will be always happening and never happening. It will be ego evolving, ego expanding. The ways that we have known each other, known ourselves, right? Maybe each other too, known ourselves will change. And it may feel jarring, but it won't be the end. And we can orient to our own hearts, we can orient to source. And we can learn how to trust and have faith that we are always going to be here, even if we are different. All right, so much love to all of you. I'll talk to you next time.